I used to do information technology work for a company that dealt with chemicals. The place has since been shut down, but I worked there for about 4 years. I would fix technical problems and make sure all the technology in the place was running smoothly. I installed a 24-camera security system that covered every bit of the inside and outside of the facility. When installing it, I was specifically instructed to put the cameras in the test facility on a different loop, so the rest of the employees, including myself, didn't have access to the feed. They also wanted me to put the computers in there on a different network as well. Anytime there would be technical problems anywhere else, it was easy to deal with. Anytime there was a problem in the testing site, however, it was incredibly annoying. I would have to have a guard and one of the executives with me monitoring everything I did. They would also restrict my access to the exact area that the tech problem was and used thick black sheets to cover up everything else. It made every simple fix take several days longer than it needed to. One time, I was working on one of the computers on the testing site, and they forgot to give me access to the light switch. I asked for access, and finally just ended up fixing the problem with a flashlight. It was ridiculous, but they were very careful about revealing anything that happened in that area. One day, I was talking with some of the workers when we heard several screams come from the testing site. I checked the security monitors to figure out where it came from, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Of course, we didn't have eyes on the testing site, so I got on the radio and asked if everyone was okay. All the workers were fine, but everyone on the testing site was on a different radio signal. It was a breach of protocol, but we all went to the testing site doors, pounded on the doors, and asked if everyone was okay. There were faint sounds of people scurrying around on the other side, but nobody responded to us. Suddenly, about 10 men with rifles and hazmat suits came in and ordered everyone out of the facility. We all waited in the parking lot for about an hour, and a man in a suit pulled up and told us all to go home for the day. The next day, I was about to leave for work when I got a call that the facility was shut down for a week and that I would be paid for the week off. I asked if everyone was okay, and they said they weren't at liberty to disclose any information and they would let me know when to come back to work. I got in my car and drove by the facility, and the gates were closed. A couple of days later, I got a call that the facility was shut down and I'd be receiving a severance package. I parked by a gas station that was close to the facility to see if I could see anything. There was no movement for a while, and I was about to get out of there when suddenly I see the gates open and 3 black vans pull in. They drive straight up to the entrance and open their back doors. The men in hazmat suits start loading huge black bags into the back of the vans. Each bag took 2 men to load in the vans. I was horrified. Were these body bags? Did those people at the testing site die? I tried to rationalize it and convince myself I was being paranoid. They had to just be getting the last pieces of trash out of there. But if that was the case, wouldn't they just put everything in the dumpster out back? Something bizarre and possibly illegal was going on here. I got the hell out of there. I didn't want to be seen witnessing this and end up in the back of one of those vans. Later that night, I was scrolling through Facebook that the building had burned down. The report said it appeared to be due to faulty wiring. I couldn't believe it. I had to see it for myself. I drove by, and sure enough, the police and fire department had closed the road down, and you could still see the smoke billowing out of the remains of the building. I've since moved on with my life. I moved to Wisconsin, got a new job, and I have a beautiful spouse and family now. This experience has made me untrusting of people and has given me a passionate hatred of things done in secret. I realized that you could be completely innocent and have the best of intentions in the world and still end up in a body bag due to other people's sketchy behavior. Perhaps I could have saved everybody's lives if I had access to the security feed. This weighs heavily on me, but not knowing exactly what happened is even worse. Was it an accident that killed everyone in the testing site, or was it even more sinister? Were those people's deaths intentional? What kind of tests were they running in there, and why was it all top secret? And most importantly, why did they burn the building down? What didn't they want anyone to find in there? Back when I was training for the National Park Service, I was living in Pennsylvania. Some of the other trainees and I had the opportunity to do some field work in a rural area. There wasn't much up there besides farmland and miles of deep woods. We spent the days focusing on things like search and rescue and wilderness first aid. We were so young back then, in our early 20s, so when we were off duty, we were known to let loose a little bit. One weekend, it was around midnight, and we had spent a few hours fooling around, telling stories and building a bonfire up in one of the cow pastures. In order to get back to our lodging from the pasture, we had to walk about half a mile through the woods and across another field. One of the guys had a habit of messing with us on our way back. He loved to try and spook us as we crossed the field. We started walking back, and as we emerged from the path, we started hearing loud rustling noises in the trees along the edge of the field, maybe 50 yards away. We all ran into the middle of the field and were looking around and laughing, thinking he was going to spring something on us. We sat down in the field and waited for the attack. After about 5 minutes of the intermittent leaf rustling and no sign of our buddy, we got more serious and started debating whether it was a black bear or some other big animal. But the sound was distinctly the sound of footsteps, like something bipedal stomping around. The sound would pick up and then suddenly stop as if someone was running tree to tree. We got a little freaked out, and my buddy pulled out his cell phone and called the landline at the cabin. He walked a little ways in the direction of the house, while my other friend and I stayed sitting down, staring in the direction of the noises. Suddenly, something ran out of the tree line. I will never forget this image for as long as I live. At that point, it was about 25 yards away, and there was only a half moon out, so there wasn't much light to make out the details. But we watched as this incredibly tall thing ran across a portion of the field and then back into the trees. It was skinny, with disproportionately long limbs, and in the dark appeared to be a solid light gray, white color. As it ran, its incredibly long arms and legs swung in this disturbingly unusual way, and it appeared to be moving much faster than it should have been. Then it suddenly stopped and looked right over at us. I was riveted. I was watching it and trying to convince myself that it was our friend dressed up in some crazy costume, but there was no way. It was close to 7 feet tall, and the way it had been moving was inhuman. It was stretched out in a way that didn't resemble our friend's body type at all. It was terrifying to have it looking at us like that, and we thought for sure it was going to run at us and do God knows what. But then, as fast as it had appeared, it was gone back into the forest. My friend and I looked at each other in total disbelief. Then we stood up, ready to run back to the cabin. Our other friend, who had been on the phone, walked back over to us, oblivious to what we just saw. He said the jokester, who we had thought was going to play a trick on us, had picked up the phone at the cabin. He said he'd been in bed for an hour. Without saying anything, me and my friend who witnessed that thing started sprinting for our lives back to the cabin. The other friend followed us without understanding what the hell had gotten into us. We made it back, locked all the doors, and told him what we had seen coming out of the woods. None of us slept very well that night. We could have sworn that we kept hearing something banging on the side of the house and windows. I mean, it could have been the wind or whatever, but the vision of that creature was absolutely petrifying. I'm telling you, if you had seen it, you wouldn't believe it. It was not something you would think existed on this earth. It wasn't an animal. It was some kind of impossible humanoid thing that you would think only existed in the movies. As someone who doesn't usually believe in the paranormal, it's not a story I tell often. But the two friends who were there and I still talk about it regularly, and it scares the crap out of us. Sometimes I'll try to look up mythological creatures or whatever to see if there are accounts of such a thing in that area, but I haven't come up with a reasonable explanation. I don't know what to believe, but I know what I saw, and it's safe to say you're never going to catch me in that part of the woods again, especially at night. I really enjoy my work as a park ranger, but I also really enjoy being armed and ready for whatever strangeness I might encounter. After that happened, I wasn't as quick to dismiss people who had weird stories to tell. So far, I haven't had a direct experience like that again, but I have entered places where I felt like no good was going to come of me going any further. Punctuality is important to me. I can't stand being late. I think I have that in common with a lot of people. Do other people obsess over the things that slow them down? Do other people sit in the office stewing about the car that held up traffic? Probably not. Maybe I take things to an extreme. It's because of that extreme that I can remember this night so clearly. By the time I tell this story, maybe you'll see that my obsessive behavior isn't all bad after all. I wouldn't remember the details if I wasn't still fixated on them weeks later. In this case, though, maybe my obsession wasn't just over my compromised punctuality. I was driving to a Christmas party in the southeast suburbs of Chicago. Coming from 3 hours south, that drive isn't exactly a thrilling experience. I left at 2 p.m. to ensure that I'd arrive by the 6 p.m. start time, regardless of any traffic or weather delays. It was snowing pretty generously, not enough to clog the roads, but enough to make the visitors from out of town weary. When I saw the flashing lights in the distance, indicating that there had been an accident, I wasn't particularly surprised. I was just hoping that I wouldn't be late due to someone else's poor driving. Strangely enough, I couldn't see the wreck when I reached the line of emergency personnel. There were more lights off the side of the road, and I could see a few men and women struggling to put up a tarp barricade, but it was too far away to be a car or motorcycle. They would have had to drop out of the sky to land that far out. It wasn't police in front of me either. Unmarked black vehicles and men standing around without any visible badges or identification. It was a shady operation. Again, I wasn't surprised when it started slowing people down. I watched the minutes tick away and anxiously bid farewell to my timely party arrival. The men in black were directing traffic one of two ways. Civilians went left into a clogged lane flanked by orange cones. Other emergency personnel, if that's what they were being directed through a gap in the black vehicles. Most of them were turning and driving off-road, but the lane ahead of us was completely clear. If they wanted to, they could have kept driving straight and completely avoided the traffic being created by the detour. I couldn't help myself. I needed to make up for lost time, not give up more of it inching through the emergency lane. I pretended not to understand the directions given to me. The wind and the snow made it believable. I drove straight. The guy I ignored chased after me on foot. He banged a few times on my rear windshield. If I'm being honest, it scared me. I sped up. I watched a few more of the men in black try to wave me down before I got too far down the road. If they hadn't acted so panicked, I might not have seen it. I would have been staring ahead, thinking about the party. I would have been cycling through my mental list of nooks and crannies where I knew the police would be hiding with their radar guns. I would have already been speeding. Instead, the shouting and their frantic waving pulled my attention outside of the car. My eyes wandered beyond the road, to the collection of lights and to the tarp that the emergency personnel were still wrestling with. It flapped loose and revealed the hulking metal mass that the strange government officials were trying to obscure. It was shaped like a plate or a frisbee, obviously metallic and the size of a semi-trailer. The structure was lodged in the ground at an angle. The back half of the disc-shaped vehicle had broken off. It lay flat on the snowy earth, just behind the portion that was stuck in the dirt. I was reminded of the Titanic. Supposedly, the front half went down and the back half broke off, right? I imagine the people working to hide the vehicle would have preferred that it landed in the open ocean. They would have preferred it sunk to the bottom of the sea, instead of sitting there on the side of an Illinois road. There were a few body bags behind the tarp, placed in a line alongside the rack. I saw 3 of them. The snow made it hard to tell if there were more. The bags were short, too short to belong to any adult, you know? Maybe too short to belong to a human being. I made it to that party. I was acting a little strange, but I'm not the most social person to begin with. I'm sure everyone else figured that I was distracted by the same monotonous things we all deal with. When I got home, my real distraction was waiting for me. More of the figures and unlabeled uniforms. More black vehicles driving around my neighborhood. They stopped me at my door. They asked a few questions about that night. They asked me what I'd seen, and, without explanation, they asked me if I had been suffering from any nosebleeds lately. I lied. I told them I couldn't see a thing in the storm. They liked that answer. The nosebleeds? I don't know why they were happening. They stopped a few weeks later. I did as much research as I could. I made phone calls. I combed the internet. There wasn't an accident reported that night. All I can do now is obsess over the details. I'm still upset that I didn't make it to that party on time. I'm upset that I don't have answers either. What was that disc-shaped vehicle? What could have been lying in those small body bags? What was with the nosebleeds, and what would have happened if I didn't lie to those men on my porch?